Smile, be, chat, join for networking.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
I'm Jason. I'm a director of For Networking, so don't hold that against me. I also run a video games company, a marketing agency, and a furniture retail business. So I'm a jack of all trades. But more importantly than all those things, first and foremost, I am a geek. I am a video game nerd. Hands up, anyone else that loves video games? Okay, couple in the room, that's kind of neat. Most times I say that, literally silence, deathly silence, and it's just me, the one that doesn't wash, lives under my mum's stairs. For me, it kind of started when I was young, and I grew up basically getting knocked about by a overzealous stepdad. And video games kind of became my Narnia. It was my magic wardrobe. It was my ability to open a door and be anything other than what I was, which was a young lad getting digs for no reason. I could be a fighter, a wizard, a warrior, footballer, anything other than what I was. And I think that was the first lesson I kind of learned at a young age, which was you have to find your passion and live it. Don't be afraid of who you are or what you are. You know, take that on board and use it to empower you. Because I think that was something that you could have very easily lost sight of when you're young. You know, what am I supposed to be and how am I supposed to do it? So I left school literally at 16, no qualifications, like, you know, other people in the room. No idea what I wanted to be or what I was. And I was playing games with a guy, a friend who lived underneath me. And we went to a job centre and I saw a job advert and it was £3,500 a year, games testing job. And it was with a company that I'd played their games from in Manchester. And I went for the job, got the job, literally spent the 2 best years of my life playing video games all day. Every day, literally. £3,500 a year. The problem is, halfway through that, I developed something that I'd never had, which was a commercial conscience. Literally never had one, didn't know what it was. And I was getting told by the kind of people above me, you have to release these games when you know that the games are not ready to be released. They still have problems, bugs. And I kind of got this kind of cloak of righteousness and I said, if you guys won't listen to me, I'm gonna go and basically find an avenue, a vehicle for me to be able to communicate directly to the audience. So I joined a video game magazine. And I basically then started to write about all of these things. And that was fantastic for about a month. And then I got promoted. And as I got further promoted up the kind of chain of command, as it were, on the magazine, I started to find that I had to basically compromise that integrity every single month, because you had advertising, you had publishers that were saying, you know, here's our new game, but if you don't give it a good review score, we're not going to advertise, we're not going to pay your wages. And I think that was my second lesson. It was your integrity and your conscience are really valuable commodities. So try your best to kind of maintain them. Don't sell them cheaply, or at least, you know, not as cheaply as I did. I left there and I joined a US company called Microprose, a big video games company. And my job was PR manager. And because I'd been a previous magazine editor, I knew how they worked, which meant I was very, very good at this job. Too good, almost. I was young, and you know, young, arrogant, cocky, whatever words you want to describe, but it was absolutely true. And I used to brag, and I'd be in an environment like this, you know, 20, 21 years old, in a staff meeting, and they'd say, what's happening in PR? And I'd say, well, I'm going to get, you know, an 85% review score. And they went, how can you be so sure? The game's not even finished. And I said, well, I'm so good with these journalists. They actually let me write the reviews for my games myself, and they didn't believe me. I said, no, that's nonsense, of course they wouldn't. I said, okay, I'll prove it. And I got a certain phrase into a magazine review, and the phrase I think was monkey tennis, I don't know why. And I put this phrase in, and it was into a Star Trek review, and I put this phrase in the game. And again, I was a hero. I came back into the staff room, and everyone was like, God, that's amazing, for about 5 minutes, until the editor found out and fired the journal. And I think, again, it's the simple life lessons that you don't really value until you've been down that road. And the lesson was, you know, when you're good, don't get cocky. Because it happens, and sometimes you don't see it until after the fact. And that was a lesson I learned very, very early on. And that was at the same time, actually, that job, when Brad, our benevolent founder, met Richard Branson. And I was running an exhibition, and part of my job was to manage the exhibition builds and all the stands. And Brad was, you know, he had a bit of spare time, I think some people call it unemployed, but I prefer spare time. He had some spare time, and I said, look, do you want to earn, a quick 500 quid? Absolutely. Fast forward. He's then basically running around a London exhibition centre dressed head to toe in a 6-foot worm costume. Literally bright pink, looked like Mr. Blobby. And he had kind of machine guns, because we publicised this game called Worms. So he's running around this exhibition, basically just causing havoc. Barging in front of cameras, interrupting meetings, just generally. And he had this Mr. Blobby voice box. So everything he said just kind of went, like that. And he kind of burst into one stand, and it was the Virgin stand, Virgin Interactive, who were quite big at the time in the industry. Burst open a meeting door. 6 very, very angry-looking Japanese guys, and Richard Branson all sat there, just staring at him. And he sort of stopped, and they stopped, and Brad just kind of froze, like that. As if to say, I'm not here. And they're kind of looking, and these Japanese guys are thinking, is this a Virgin thing? Is it some kind of And then Brad just kind of went, and bombed out of the door. And it was brilliant. But I suppose the lesson from that was be very careful, because being brash can get you noticed, which is, people talked earlier about being noticed. You just have to be slightly careful, because that guy that you kind of take the mickey out of for comedy value, fast forward like 20 years and he ends up being your boss. So anyway, that company was acquired by a bigger toy company called Hasbro, and I was retained there as marketing director. And I was working on some really, really big brands, Action Man, Furby, Monopoly, Cluedo, all of these really, really big brands. But one of the key components that people forget is they were just board games, just square piece of card with different shaped figures. And what they did very well to market them was created an identity, told a story. And that's something you can do with your own business too. Because every product, every service, every company, every person has a story. But you have to find someone passionate to tell that story for you, if you can't do it yourself. Some people are very skilled, Steve, the barman, great storyteller. Some people, not so good. You need to find people to help you do that, and that's where very, very skilled marketeers can help. So I left that company, and I basically joined a Sky-funded technology company called Static. And we launched an interactive TV channel called PlayJam. And the idea was you basically played video games through the TV using your Sky remote. The thing they'd forgot was how to commercialise it. They'd got all this venture capital money, they'd got all this funding, they'd got all these great kind of minds. But no one had thought, well, how do we actually make money from these games? Because who cares about playing Connect 4 through your remote control on a TV? So I kind of went in and I helped change their structure a little. And what we ended up doing was we took things like Connect 4 and we made it M&Ms. So the game you were playing became effectively a brand marketing exercise for all of these companies. And I think the lesson there is understand your business. Every business is 4 things: the right product at the right price, in the right place, with the right promotion. Your 4 Ps, that's it. They failed on the pricing thing. They didn't think about how they'd make their money, and that was criminal. So I left there and I joined another company, which is an American video games company. And we had this strategy of, let's try and get lucky. And that was our only strategy. It literally was. And it was terrible. And we developed as many games as we could, threw them at the wall, and hoped that literally one of them would stick. And it did. And it was just frightening. And it was a game called Cooking Mama. And the idea with Mama was that you were this weird little Japanese lady making pies. That was the game. It was the most ridiculous game idea ever. And it cost us about $100,000. We sold about 15 million units of Cooking Mama at $30 wholesale. So we basically turned that $100,000 into 450 million turnover. Literally overnight. And to give you some idea, the most recent Call of Duty game, 100 million to develop, probably the same again in marketing. So our development budget was 0.1%. So the lesson, lucky, yeah, sometimes it can work, but it doesn't last. That's the key thing. So with that newfound kind of money and energy, what it did is, in a way, it got us a seat at tables we didn't really belong at. So, you go and kind of you want to be the big boys and you want to kind of, hey, let's get involved with these guys. And some of these developers, they just saw us coming. So one development project in particular, we signed a $16 million game. It's a lot of money. based on the picture of a hastily scrawled dragon on a napkin. Literally, a napkin with a dragon on it that the guy did at a meeting. Very quickly realised, couldn't actually pay for it. And didn't have the skills to bring it to market in the first place, because we were used to casual games. This wasn't a casual game, it was a hardcore game. And we then had to get out of the contract, and it cost us 10% to get out of that contract. So we basically spent $1.6 million on a picture of a napkin with a dragon on it, which is still actually on the CEO's wall. And I guess, you know, the lesson's obvious. Dragons, just like your ego, can be really dangerous and really expensive. So just be very, very careful about how you work. If you had a pen and a paper, I would ask you to do a really, really quick exercise now to kind of almost explain how that sort of situation works. And it's what's called a cognitive reflection test. And it's one question that forms the 3 in the shortest IQ test in the world. And the question's really simple. I want you to buy a bat and a ball, okay? You've got £1.10 to buy a bat and a ball, but the bat's got to cost you £1 more than the ball. So the question is, how much is the ball? Relatively straightforward. Most people are going to say 10 pence. Absolutely wrong, because it's 5p. The problem is, if the bat has got to cost £1 more, then if your ball's 10p, that means your bat's £1 10p. Add them together, it's 120. You're over budget. The answer's 5. Ball's 5p, the bat's £1 5p. Add them together. But what it demonstrates is sometimes there's a need for deeper analysis, not harsh, kind of rash judgment. You know, you have to be quick, you have to be decisive, but sometimes remember there's a need to analyse. And that was something we quite evidently didn't really do when it comes to dragons and napkins. So we kind of carried on with this whole, hey, let's get lucky strategy. And we did. We got lucky again with a fitness game called Zumba. And Zumba was our game. We sold, 12, 13 million units of this fitness craze, because we managed to jump right on that kind of tail when it went through the roof in terms of its popularity. We developed games. They weren't particularly good games, but of course there was lots of people that wanted to take those games to market. So we managed to sell, you know, tons and tons of these units. The difficulty then is our previous bad decision making then gave us an element of decision paralysis, because we then sort of got all this money and thought, don't know what's happening with the market, let's wait. So we waited and we waited, and we slowly watched that money erode away. 40 million goes down to 30, goes down to 20. Then you start to panic. And when you're then panicking, you then start making really bad decisions. And we did. We started to invest in lottery games, bingo games, social media games. We did a game based on fleas. Did another game based on car parking. If it was musical fleas driving the cars, I'd have understood. But it wasn't. It was, you know, and the lesson there is, you know, you can get that decision paralysis. So I think what's key is do your analysis, make your decisions, and move on. You know, don't labour too long about how you do these things. So I think I'm running out of time a little bit, so I'm going to jump onto a couple of very, very quick lessons about video games. Everyone knows Grand Theft Auto. Okay, so you can go into banks, you can, you know, pull out your gun, you can kind of shoot a couple of people, you can steal all the money. See, that sounded so much better in my head. I'm sure there was a lesson somewhere there, and I've kind of, right, forget that one, right, okay. So, Pac-Man, everyone knows Pac-Man, right? Why does Pac-Man move so quick? Because he's got 4 ghosts chasing him, and he's hungry. And that's exactly the same as when you're running a business. You move quicker in your business when you've got things chasing you, whether that's your mortgage, your bank, your partner, your kids, whatever. If you didn't, you'd just kind of be sat there in a room gobbling all day. And that, if you ask Brad, that doesn't work particularly well. Another one, Angry Birds. Everyone knows Angry Birds? Okay, Angry Birds was their 53rd game. Their previous 52 all failed. So did they get really lucky with Angry Birds? Or did they learn a little something from every single failure? And I think experience is basically what you win when you lose. So don't be afraid to make decisions. Don't be afraid to use that. You look at James Dyson, for example. Everyone knows the Hoover, the Dyson, right? That cyclone technology, his first product was called the ball barrow, which was a wheelbarrow with a ball. Didn't particularly work, but whilst he was developing that, in the factory where he developed it, there was this great cyclone technology that picked all the dust up so it wouldn't get on the wheelbarrows. And that's where the Hoover came from. So that's the experience he won when he lost. So it's a good thing, a good kind of thing to bear in mind. Gauntlet, now some old video game fans would probably remember Gauntlet. I know Brad does, I do. It was a classic dungeon crawling game. But the irony was there was no end to it. There was no last level. You just kept going and kept going, and nobody knew. So they'd be, I got to level 100, I got to level 150, they'd just keep going. The game just was constant, just like running your own business. You've just got to keep going. Every single time you think it's going bad, you've just got to keep going. Keep moving to that next level. Keep yourself busy, keep yourself occupied. I'm going to leave you on the last one. Space Invaders, everyone. Pretty familiar with Space Invaders. Okay, little guy at the bottom. Bases above you, all the bases are overloaded. Constant streams of stuff firing down at you. You only get certain lives on Space Invaders. There's no end to it again. The only thing that matters is your high score. So think about that from your life. What's your scoring system for your life as individuals? You're going to look back and look at, do you remember 20 years ago when I had that SQ5? Do you remember when I went on that holiday? It's about experiences. You've got to ask yourself, what's the scoring system for your life? Because in most video games, you get 3 lives. You guys, you get 1. So just make it count. And that's it, my life in video games, in a very quick nutshell.
Smile, be